Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 1, Episode 6, The Distress Signal. The Havoc glided silently through the asteroid field, its hull like an ink blot in the dim starlight. The massive ship's sensors probed the rocky debris, searching for valuable minerals amidst the celestial graveyard. Nolan Mercer leaned forward in the captain's chair. His holographic control panel floated before him. His eyes scanned the readouts for anything of interest. The eerie silence of space was broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems and the occasional ping of the scanner, creating a rhythmic symphony of solitude. An alarm shattered the quiet, its urgent beeping echoing through the bridge. Nolan did his best to read through the codes and tap all the right buttons. The alert details materialized before him, casting an ominous glow across his furrowed brow. "Distress signal detected," Ilara's disembodied voice announced, a note of caution in her tone. The AI's voice seemed to hang in the air, a ghostly presence in the vast emptiness of space. "Origin, approximately 200 kilometers starboard, emanating from a small vessel. I have no reading on the vessel's configuration." Nolan folded his arms, the muscles in his jaw tightening imperceptibly. The look on his face spoke of too many similar encounters, each one a potential threat in the unforgiving expanse of space. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weariness of a man who had seen too much. "Details, Ilara?" he asked, as though it was tiresome to do so, because he really didn't want to know, already plotting an approach vector. Ilara's response came swiftly, her artificial voice somehow managing to convey both efficiency and concern. "The signal is weak and degrading rapidly. I'm detecting multiple life signs aboard, but they're faint. The ship appears to have sustained significant damage." Nolan weighed his options, his fingers drumming a thoughtful rhythm on the armrest of his chair. The soft tapping echoed in the cavernous bridge, a counterpoint to the insistent beeping of the alert. His instincts, honed by years of survival, screamed caution. Yet a part of him, the part that still clung to his humanity after all this time, couldn't ignore a cry for help. "Ilara, keep the Havoc at a safe distance," he commanded, resignation coloring his tone. "I'm taking the little Maldor cruiser to investigate. I've been wanting to stretch its legs a bit." Moments later, Nolan guided the blocky, rust-eared Maldor cruiser through the asteroid field. The ship, resembling an oversized brick, darted between the massive rocks with surprising agility. Its unusual graviton pulse drive allows it some astonishing directional changes. Debris pinged off its hull as Nolan expertly navigated the treacherous terrain. As he approached the source of the distress signal, a battered ship came into view. Its once-sleek hull was now scarred and breached in multiple places, the damage telling a silent story of multiple violent encounters. Despite its battered state, the vessel's design hinted at potential advanced technology beyond, at least what Nolan had seen from the locals. "Sensors indicate it's been adrift for some time." Ilara's voice crackled through the comb, the static underlining the distance between them. "Life signs are extremely faint and degrading rapidly." Nolan maneuvered his red brick alongside the damaged vessel, the contrast between the two ships stark in the cold light of distant stars. Making a quick spin around the ship, he realized there was no apparent docking port or entry hatch on the damaged ship. He'd been wondering how the Maldor's oddly styled transporters worked. When it comes to scattering one's molecules across space, one method is typically as good as another's. He aimed toward the ship's aft compartment and activated the transporter. With a loud sound that sounded like a bark, he vanished instantly from the little cruiser, leaving flying, swirling debris in his wake. He landed solidly on his feet, as if he'd been dropped from 8 or 10 feet in the air. The acrid smell of burning circuitry and something distinctly alien assaulted Nolan's nostrils. He stepped cautiously into the dim interior of the ship, his eyes straining to adjust to the low light. Sparks flew from damaged consoles at irregular intervals, casting eerie, dancing shadows across the walls. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing ominously in the empty corridor. Anyone alive in here? A weak groan answered him from further inside the ship, the sound barely audible over the creaking of stressed metal. Nolan moved towards the sound, his footsteps careful and measured on the unstable deck plates. He rounded a corner and found himself in what appeared to be the bridge. Several alien bodies lay sprawled across the floor, their strange forms motionless in the flickering emergency lights. As Nolan knelt to check on the nearest alien, a flash of movement caught his eye. Before he could react, a stun blast hit him square in the chest, the energy crackling across his body. The force sent him crashing backward onto the deck, his head slamming against the metal floor. As consciousness slipped away, he saw several figures emerge from hidden compartments, their faces twisted in triumphant grins. The last thing Nolan heard before blackness took him was a gravelly voice. "Lock him down. We'll take his shuttle back to his ship." The acrid smell of ozone and scorched circuitry pulled Nolan from unconsciousness, the stench seeming to burrow into his very pores. His eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus in the dim, flickering light of the brig. As awareness returned, so did the memory of his ill-fated rescue attempt, along with a wave of self-recrimination. "I doubt that went well," he muttered, his voice hoarse and barely audible. The thought of his attackers taking the Maldor cruiser sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He pushed himself up with a groan, every muscle protesting the movement. His head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and his chest felt as though it had caught a flaming asteroid, a painful reminder of the stun blast that had taken him down. Nolan surveyed his surroundings, taking in the Spartan cell with its shimmering force field barrier. Beyond, he could see the corridor of the ship, littered with debris and occasionally illuminated by sparking wires. The ship's systems were clearly on their last legs, the walls groaning under the strain of maintaining hull integrity. He patted his pockets, unsurprised to find his comm badge and other gear missing. "Ilara," he called out, more out of habit than hope. As expected, only silence answered him, broken by the occasional crackle of failing circuitry. A wry smile crossed his face as he imagined the scene aboard his Maldor cruiser. That little brick, as he affectionately called it, was a work in progress, a deadly one. "Hope you boys enjoyed the ride," he murmured, picturing the traps and fail-safes in the little craft springing to life. "If you didn't adjust the cabin pressure manually, after about 2 minutes it would just vent the atmo and kill the power. Anyone inside at the time, well, it was going to be a bad day." Meanwhile, aboard the Havoc, Ilara's usually calm demeanor betrayed signs of agitation. Her voice, emanating from the ship's speakers, carried a subtle tension, a rare deviation from her typical composure. Her attention was fully focused on the viewscreen, monitoring Nolan's recent pet project, the Maldor cruiser, as it tumbled erratically through space. The ship's systems seemed to hum with a nervous energy, mirroring Ilara's internal turmoil as she watched the precarious situation unfold. "Nolan, can you hear me?" She tried again, her voice echoing in the empty bridge. The cruiser's trajectory told her all she needed to know. Its systems had been compromised, likely with lethal consequences for its passengers. But sensors couldn't pinpoint if Nolan was inside, leaving her in a state of anxious uncertainty. Back in the brig, Nolan was methodically testing the confines of his cell, his fingers tracing the edges of the force field, feeling for fluctuations. The energy barrier hummed and crackled under his touch, but remained frustratingly stable. "Come on, you've got to give me something," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the ship's continued groaning. The structural integrity field was obviously blown, and the ship was holding together with nothing but nuts, bolts, and welds. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, the deck plates buckling beneath Nolan's feet. He was thrown off balance, his shoulder slamming into the wall with a dull thud. The lights flickered wildly, and for a brief moment the force field wavered, its steady hum faltering. It wasn't much, but to Nolan's experienced eye, it was the revelation. A predatory grin spread across his face, the expression transforming his features. "Well now," he said to himself, his voice low and dangerous, "looks like this bucket of bolts isn't quite as stable as our friends might have hoped." He began to formulate a plan, his mind racing through possibilities, weighing risks against potential rewards. As if on cue, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor, the sound reverberating off the metal walls. Nolan quickly composed himself, adopting a posture of defeat. His muscles tensed beneath the facade of resignation, ready for whatever or whoever was about to round that corner. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the sound of labored breathing and muttered curses in an alien tongue. Whoever was coming, they weren't happy. The air seemed to thicken with tension as Nolan waited, every sense on high alert. As the figure rounded the corner, Nolan's eyebrows rose in surprise, his mask of defeat momentarily slipping. A hulking alien, easily 7 feet tall with mottled green skin and multiple arms, stumbled into view. Its face was a mass of writhing tentacles, quivering with each labored breath. One of its 4 hands clutched a nasty-looking energy weapon, while another pressed against a clearly injured side, green ichor seeping between its fingers. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Nolan drawled, his Oklahoma twang more pronounced than usual. The familiar accent was a stark contrast to the alien surroundings, a reminder of a home long lost. The alien's tentacles writhed in what Nolan assumed was anger or pain, possibly both. Silence. It gurgled, its voice like stones in a blender. "Your trickery has cost us dearly." Viscous droplets sprayed from the writhing mass of tentacles on his face. Nolan leaned against the cell wall, feigning casualness even as his muscles coiled, ready for action. "Trickery? I'm just a simple man, trying to make my way in the galaxy. You folks are the ones who decided to play pirate today. Half my crew floats dead on your wretched little vessel," he hissed, his voice seething with venom. "Shame, that," Nolan replied, his eyes darting to the unstable force field. "Maybe next time. Don't steal wretched little ships you don't know how to fly." The alien roared again, slamming his fist against the force field, sparks flying, as if joining in with his anger. Another violent tremor shook the ship. Alarms blared to life, their shrill wails echoing through the corridors. The alien's arms whipped about in panic. It turned and lumbered away, leaving Nolan alone once more. "Well, that was informative," Nolan muttered to himself, his mind racing. The ship was clearly in worse shape than he'd thought, and his captors were down in numbers. It was time to make a move. Meanwhile, aboard the Havoc, Alara had made a decision. "Initiating emergency protocols," she announced to the empty bridge, preparing for closer-range scan and potential retrieval operation. The Havoc's engines hummed to life, maneuvering the massive ship through the asteroid field with surprising grace. As it closed in on the derelict and the tumbling brick nearby, its powerful scanners probed the smaller vessel, searching for any sign of Nolan. Back in the brig, Nolan watched the force field intently. With each tremor that rocked the ship, the barrier flickered more intensely, its hum becoming erratic. He pulled off his boot and extracted a thin metal wire he kept hidden in the sole, a holdover from his days in the Marines centuries ago. "Come on, baby," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the fluctuating barrier. "Give me an opening." As if in answer to his plea, the ship bucked violently. The force field sputtered and died for a split second. It was all Nolan needed. With lightning-fast reflexes, he jammed the wire into the field generator on the side of the opening. A shower of sparks erupted, the acrid smell of burnt circuitry and arm hair filling the cell. The barrier fell with a final, dying hum. Nolan was out in an instant, his body coiled and ready for action. He paused at the corridor junction, listening intently. In the distance, he could hear panicked shouts and the sound of failing systems, a symphony of chaos. A grim smile played across his lips, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. Smells like revenge, Mercer," he said out loud, remembering a long-lost brother saying it to him long ago. He set off down the corridor, moving with predatory grace. The hunt was on, and Nolan Mercer was enjoying a dark place he hadn't been for a long while. Nolan moved silently through the corridors, his marine training kicking in like muscle memory. The ship groaned and shuddered around him, emergency lights casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. He paused at an intersection, his back pressed against the cold metal, listening intently. The sound of labored breathing reached his ears. One of the alien pirates was just around the corner. With practiced ease, Nolan fashioned a makeshift garrote from wires hanging loose in a damaged wall panel. The thin metal felt familiar in his hands, a grim reminder of skills long dormant but never forgotten. He waited, timing his move perfectly, his breath shallow and controlled. As the alien passed, Nolan struck with lethal precision. The wire went taut around the creature's throat, cutting off its surprised gurgle. Nolan bent forward, lifting the alien's feet from the floor. With a sickening crunch, the pirate lurched and went limp, its alien form sagging in Nolan's grip. He eased the body to the floor. Nolan appropriated the alien's weapon, a nasty-looking energy blaster that hummed with power in his hand. "There's one," he muttered, his voice cold and detached. He continued his hunt, moving through the ship like a predator, every sense alert for danger. As the Havoc approached the damaged vessel, Ilara's voice echoed through the empty corridors of the enormous ship. "Initiating blink sequence. Prepare for sudden mass displacement." Her words hung in the air, unheard by any organic ears. In a flash of light that momentarily outshone the nearby stars, both the derelict and the drifting Maldor cruiser appeared inside the Havoc's cavernous hold. Tractor beams engaged immediately, bathing the smaller vessels in a soft blue glow as they were guided to the landing bay. Nolan had cornered another pirate in the engine room. The space was a maze of damaged machinery and sparking consoles, the air thick with the smell of burning polymer and alien fuel. The pirate, a different species from the first, fired wildly with a plasma cutter. Blue-white energy scorched the air, leaving glowing trails in its wake. Nolan dove behind a console, the acrid smell of melted metal filling his nostrils. "If you surrender, I probably won't kill you," he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. The only response was another series of wild bursts from the plasma cutter, which sizzled past his head, leaving a molten gash in the wall behind him. Nolan sighed, a sound of resignation rather than fear. He rolled out from cover, his stolen blaster finding its mark with unerring accuracy. The pirate fell with a strangled cry, a burst of fire and black smoke rising from its chest. "There's two," Nolan muttered, turning back to the corridor, leaving the fallen alien without a second glance. As Nolan made his way to the bridge, the ship's corridors became a battlefield of flickering lights and failing systems. He encountered the tentacle-faced alien from earlier, its massive form blocking the passageway. The creature roared in fury, its multiple arms swinging wildly as it charged. Nolan's reflexes, honed by centuries of survival, kicked in. He jumped to the side, using the alien's uncontrolled momentum to his advantage. With a sickening crunch, he smashed the alien's head into a support strut. Before it could recover, Nolan brought the butt of his weapon down hard on the back of its skull, or what passed for one. The alien crashed to the floor, twitching spasmodically. "And that makes three," Nolan said, stepping over the fallen pirate. Suddenly, the alien's hand shot out, grabbing his ankle with godlike strength. Without hesitation, Nolan blasted it 3 times before it let go, the energy weapon leaving smoking craters in the alien's flesh. "That makes 3. Geez," he muttered, shaking his head as he continued towards the bridge. He reached the command center just as the Havoc's tractor beams locked onto the ship. Through the view screen, Nolan saw the familiar interior of his ship's landing bay, a sight that filled him with relief. A smile, part relief and part triumph, crossed his face. "Ilara, you beautiful genius," he said, finally allowing himself to relax. The hunt was over, and Nolan was going home. Kayla. Days later, the Havoc's massive hold hummed with activity as Ilara directed a fleet of tenders and repair drones. Nolan's new ship, nestled securely in a docking cradle, underwent a complete overhaul. Sparks flew as damaged hull plating was removed and replaced, While inside, sophisticated small tenderbots swarmed through the ship's interior, cleaning, replicating, and replacing as they moved. Alara's algorithms clicked through ship systems, repairing circuitry and purging corrupted data. Nolan stood at the observation window, watching the process with a mix of fascination and impatience. His hands, still bearing the evidence of his recent struggle, bruised knuckles and shallow cuts, flexed unconsciously at his sides. "How much longer you think, Alara?" he asked, his voice tinged with anticipation. Alara's voice surrounded him, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Final interior repairs are nearly complete, Nolan. You should be able to board within a few hours." True to her word, Alara gave Nolan the all-clear just as he was finishing his third cup of coffee. It wasn't really coffee, though. Just brown, bitter water with caffeine in it. He grimaced at the taste, longing for the real thing he remembered from centuries ago. Stepping through the airlock, Nolan's eyes widened as he took in the restored interior. The ship gleamed as if newly built, all traces of the recent battle erased. "Damn, Alara," he whispered, running a hand along the gleaming bulkhead. "You've outdone yourself. She's beautiful." "Thank you." Alara's voice came through his comm badge. "However, we've encountered an issue. I've been unable to access the ship's logs or telemetry data. It seems the onboard computer requires direct humanoid interface." Nolan frowned, making his way to the bridge. "Any idea why?" "Negative," Alara replied. "It could be a security measure or simply an antiquated system design. You'll need to initiate the interface manually." On the bridge, Nolan settled into the captain's chair. His fingers danced across the unfamiliar controls, searching for the computer access protocols. Suddenly, a hologram flickered to life before him. The image of an alien materialized, humanoid, but with distinctly non-human features. Its voice was filled with desperation. "We're stranded on this planet. We're out of food and we're desperate. On the panel to the left, you'll see our coordinates. Please help us." The image froze, flickered, and then began to replay. Nolan tapped the screen, halting the playback. He studied the alien's face, noting the signs of exhaustion and fear. The alien had a large, elaborate metal object protruding from one eye, his head bald with old scars over his face and skull. He looked like he might once have been a terrifying soldier, now broken and clinging to life. The timestamp on this recording showed it was uploaded to the ship from the ground less than 12 days ago. The ship was a message in a bottle, and the pirates had picked it up. Nolan leaned back in the chair, deep in thought. "Well," he muttered, "rescue mission, salvage operation, rescue mission." He pulled up the coordinates mentioned in the message, plotting them against their current position. "Alara, how long would it take us to reach these coordinates?" "I don't know. How's your head?" she replied. Nolan swore he could hear a hint of sarcasm. "Just a hint. Don't we have any way to keep me awake through a jump? What's the point of getting somewhere fast if you're rolling around on the floor for 5 minutes after you get there?" "Try the pressure suit. You need to get more comfortable with it anyway," she said flatly. Nolan nodded. "Right. I'll get suited up. Go ahead and calculate the jump. Let's find out what happened to the crew of the Lost." "The Lost. That's your new name for it?" came Alara's perfectly flat reply. "What?" "It was lost. Now it's found." Nolan looked all around, shrugging his shoulders, shaking his head. "Then why not the found? Where's the mystery and history of that?" As the Havoc prepared to depart, Nolan couldn't shake a nagging feeling. The desperate plea of the alien captain echoed in his mind, stirring memories of his own long journey through the stars. Whatever they were about to find, he knew it wouldn't be simple. "All right, Alara," he said, awkwardly lowering himself into the command chair on the Havoc's bridge, trying to make the pressure suit fit in the chair. "Let's see if I can stay fully conscious this time." With that, in a bright flash of white light, the Havoc vanished. Epilogue. The Maldor cruiser's internal camera activated silently, its fisheye lens capturing the entire cockpit in grainy, red-tinted black and white. 3 humanoid aliens materialized in a silvery light, their forms distorted by the wide-angle view. They stumbled slightly, adjusting to the ship's artificial gravity. The tallest alien, his ridged forehead prominent in the stark lighting, dropped into the pilot's seat with a satisfied grunt. Did you see the look on that primitive's face when Graz zapped him? Slus. He almost did a backflip. And that G.O. gain when his head hit the floor. I was about to go for a mop. His companion chimed in, a stocky figure with distinctly non-human eyes, chuckling as he took the co-pilot's chair. The third alien, lean and sharp-featured, pushed between them, punching instructions into the nav computer. Oh, man, wait till we get to his ship. By the looks of this thing, I bet it's complete garbage. Laughter filled the cramped cockpit as the engines hummed to life. The pilot wiped tears from his eyes, still chuckling. Here's to the easiest score we've had in cycles. To Nolan Mercer, the galaxy's most gullible Good Samaritan. Their mirth was cut short by a shrill alarm. The aliens' smiles faltered, replaced by looks of confusion, then dawning horror. For a split second, their bodies seemed to expand, clothes billowing outward. The camera feed cut to static,